Hello everyone, welcome to another game. We have the white pieces against Arham Jane 16 rated 817. We play knight to c3, developing a piece towards the center. Finally, black prevents us from playing e4, so we play bishop f4, a developing move towards the center. Black plays c6, stopping our knight b5 ideas. We just continue normally with e3, solidifying the pawn chain and opening the bishop. He hops the knight into the center, which doesn't threaten anything but a trade. I kind of think we should take this because it's his only piece that's developed. He kind of just put it in the center, and now he takes in a way that when we play c4, he won't even have a pawn here to contest it. For the time being, we can leave this pawn here, or we can immediately attack it even with something like f3. Is that crazy? Probably not. You could also leave it there and play c4, but let's break it down. It's on our side of the board, so he captures. So we can take with the pawn, the queen, or the knight. They're all playable. The pawn creates a strong center, but weakens that king. We can castle queenside. The other ones are faster development. I'm going to go with the pawn. He hasn't moved this, so there's never anything with the queen, and our bishop's here anyway. Also, I'm going to castle queenside very likely, so not a big deal. And yeah, it supports this with a pawn, so we could push the pawn. We have a strong center. So he develops the light square bishop. This, of course, makes no sense considering that we can play e4 with tempo. So without much thought, let's do that move. It's a free improving move. And now he has to move it again. And then we can just develop. So he moves it here, which also doesn't make sense because it walks into d5. But currently d5 is not playable because it would hang. You could play c4 and support it. That's a thing. We could also try to develop a little bit. That would be nice. Well, this bishop is in such a weird spot, and we want to develop anyway. We can't bring our knight here, right? So logically, you'd think to bring it here. But where's it really going? I don't know. I'm kind of thinking, let's develop it this way, because at least we're threatening to go here, ruining his structure and taking the bishop. But he snap takes, so now we get to develop our bishop on a beautiful diagonal that wasn't available before, and he cannot contest us because he doesn't have the bishop. Now we have two bishops out and a perfect center, and he hasn't moved any of his pieces. So can you see how just by, I'm not an engine, I don't always know the best moves, and I don't make the best moves, but just with like talking out your moves, you can kind of make progress in your thinking. It may be weird to talk out loud, but it might help you. So he develops the knight. I'm not sure why he moved it here. It's not going anywhere. I think we should move our queen and castle long. I'm going to go here, which would align my rook with his queen. So he takes, but I'm going to checkmate this guy. So let's move with tempo, give him some more free stuff, which looks very appetizing. Ooh, that can't be good. And now, hopefully you guys sense that something's amiss. I mean, I don't know what it leads to, but let's just do it. It has to be good. He has to go here, which means you can just start taking things with discoveries. And with his bishop here, I mean, is it not checkmate? Okay. This has to be mate somewhere. What am I missing? If I sack my queen and he takes the queen, I don't have it. If I go check here, he has to go back. If I stay on this diagonal check, he has to go back. And then what do I have there now that my bishop's on b5? For starters, I can take the knight. And if he takes, that's checkmate. If he doesn't take, it's a free knight. Okay, so let's go back. Let's repeat the position. The difference is the pawn is no longer on c6 because I took it. That gives me the added possibility of going to two different squares. There is also this diagonal, check, which would force this. The problem there is you don't have this queen checkmate because this queen covers it. So check here. Do I have a different option? Probably not. Let's go for the original one. This check, which forces him here. Of course, he can always sack his queen, but what's the point? And then when he goes here, we take the knight. And now we're just up a piece. Or he takes back, and this is going to lead to checkmate, but do we have a faster one? So this check, he has to go here. And then this is mate. So that's mate in 2. If you take here, he blocks with the queen. I mean, you could do something like this and win the queen, but that's not mate in 2. So let's go for the mate in 2 because it's faster. And I knew that taking here, well, hold on, let's just go over the game instead of going back. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. We play d4, and then we try to get into a Jobava London, but only if they force us. So here he forces us. We can't play 2 pawns in the center, so we just develop a piece. Then, no big deal. Center, development. Then we trade, and it says we're +1. So we immediately try to break down this structure, but you don't have to play this way. But we do it anyway. It basically, if he takes, it helps us either with our development or our center. If he doesn't take, well, we're going to take. So either way. He takes, and you can take any way you want. I chose to go with the pawn. It's a little more interesting, supporting the pawn center. But like I said, every single recapture is playable. Then he develops his bishop here, which we just walks into this free stuff. And development, not towards the center, but with a specific idea in mind. He takes, we take, and the reason the engine said it was a mistake is because they didn't want me to give him an out for his misplaced bishop. Like, his bishop is misplaced, and it's running into stuff in the future, so don't give him this out. But I didn't care, because once he takes, and I take, I mean, look at this position. Come on. If his best move is to sack this pawn, I mean, I could live with that. So, okay. We develop a piece, and, okay. Again, they're calling this a mistake because it technically hangs the pawn. Yes, of course it hangs the pawn. But if he takes the pawn, he loses. You see, +5. So you're not actually hanging the pawn because it's clear that his king is stuck. It has no squares. So if you could just check it, it would be checkmate somehow. So again, his best move in this position is to sack the pawn. And that's why they called my moves mistakes, because of this e5 pawn thrust, which tries to get him to catch up in development, although I don't see how that works. At the cost of a pawn, I still don't see how that works. But then he takes and blunders. We immediately throw a rook, and his best move is to sack the queen so he avoids checkmate. So we provoke him to take another pawn because this just looks terrible, and it looks like maybe a lot of you think that this looks lost for white. Maybe you're like, oh my god, he blundered this pawn and now he's blundering this pawn, and I don't see a checkmate because it looks pretty solid for black. But you can see in the game that there is a specific sequence of moves that works, and it's due to this little windmill idea that we have. Without this, maybe none of this works and you just lose the game. So you have to kind of see ahead of time how good your bishops are and your rook and how bad his king is. So we give the check, mate in 5, mate in 4, mate in 3, mate in 2. Oh, I could have just done the mate immediately, right? So here, oh yeah, he has to block and that's checkmate. What did I do? Okay, so this was a mate in 3 instead of mate in 2. I wasted a turn taking the knight. Okay, that makes sense. But I want to show you that in a position like this, even though you don't have to, don't be afraid to play moves like f3 because you're going to have such an easy game. Let's say he takes and you just take with the knight because let's say you don't want to complicate the game for no reason. Like, look at this. You have such an easy game. And f3, is it really a weakness? This diagonal, your king's not going to be weak. The only thing is you have a backwards e-pawn, but you're eventually going to push it anyway, so is that really weak? Probably not. So don't be afraid to do this. And yeah, and of course you can defend this pawn, but don't waste a turn, I don't know, c3 or bishop back, or even don't go queen d2 because you want a long castle and simultaneously defend the pawn. If him taking the pawn is a blunder that leads to +5 and it looks enticing for a human, it looks like the right move, get them to do it. So when I moved here, the engine can say mistake all it wants because of some weird e5 line, but if you want a long castle, do it this way because it's way more clever, because they're most likely going to take. And if they don't take, you long castle next anyway, and you're no big deal. So that's an interesting thing. Don't be afraid of that. And then when you see this, don't look at the b pawn and try to defend it. Realize what's happening. I mean, if you did this on purpose, it's because you wanted to put a rook to d1. You know what you're doing. I guess if you did it by accident and blunder the pawn, this might come with a bit of a shock, but once you bring your rook over and he takes the other pawn, you kind of have to, I mean, you have to realize you're going to lose another pawn. So you're like, wow, I'm going to lose 3 pawns. Do I have enough for that? You really should see some attacking ideas before you sack your whole pawns, all your pawns. But it works, and hopefully you can see how now. So don't automatically defend things. Moral of the story. Good luck in your chess. See you in the next video.